Hello everyone. Today I will be finishing up the pepper drawing we started in the last video. So here's the line drawing that I did, and today I'm going to shade it. Keep in mind that while I work, I am just showing you my preferred method for shading, so if something isn't working for you, feel free to change it. In the last video, I used a graphite pencil for drawing the lines since I didn't want anything to get too dark, but today I'm going to be using a charcoal pencil for shading. I personally prefer to use charcoal because I really love how dark you can make the shadows. But if you don't have any charcoal pencils on hand, or if you just don't like charcoal, feel free to use a regular pencil. Both will work just fine. So the pepper, we can see, is a pretty dark shade on its own. So I am going to come in and lay down just this kind of flat mid-tone. The pepper is obviously quite a bit darker than what I'm drawing right now, but I want to build up to that value. I don't want to come in with something super dark only to realize that I've messed up halfway through and then be unable to erase it. So I am trying to keep my pencil pretty flat, pretty straight, going in the same direction. I don't want to be putting lines all over the place because that'll make it a little bit harder to blend out. I'm not being super careful in making sure it looks perfect, but I am trying to make sure all the strokes are going in the same direction and keep that pretty uniform. And now I'm coming in and just defining some of these darker areas a little bit better, marking where that core shadow is down the middle of the pepper, and finding some of those shapes. As you can see, when I went over with the charcoal, it very clearly covered up all of that nice line drawing and all the details that I'd written on the inside. That's something that is a little bit harder to see in the video. I can see the pencil marks a little bit better in real life, but it is something that you run the risk of in doing this method, is covering up some of those lines and then having to find it later. Typically when I do a drawing like this, I don't flesh out the line drawing as much as I did previously, and so I don't run that risk because I usually will put in the details as I shade. But if you did put in all the nice details and you want to keep them from getting covered up like this, then you can be a little bit lighter when you do this first mid-tone and kind of darken up those lines before you shade it. So once I put that mid-tone down, I did just get a kitchen paper towel and I blended it all together. And I didn't really worry too much about keeping in any of the lines. I just blended it all out. I like to kind of tone my paper a little bit as I blend and as I do different layers of charcoal. If you saw my previous video on shading and kind of the basics and intro in shading, you will remember that there is an additive process of shading and a subtractive process. The additive process, you start with a white paper and you put on your charcoal. The subtractive process, you start with a toned paper that you've covered in a mid-tone of charcoal, and then you use your eraser and your pencil to define your shapes. For my personal preference, I like using kind of a combination of both of those. I start with a white piece of paper, I lay down that kind of mid-tone, I blend it all out, and in doing so, kind of tone the object and tone the paper, so I can go in with my eraser and use that as a drawing tool as well as my pencil. Now I'm just redefining some of the lines that have gotten a little bit faint, so I'm making sure that I don't lose those completely. I'm still keeping some of the lines relatively faint because some of them in the finished picture won't be very dark. They're kind of light against light or something. So I'm just doing that to make sure I don't totally lose my shape. Then I'm going to come in and, similar to how I shaded the pepper, I'm just going to come in with very even strokes and put in the shadow. I am pressing harder so the marks will be darker and I can start to kind of build up to the really, really deep dark that the shadow is. It definitely won't be there yet, but it'll be darker than the pepper at least. So then I come in with that same paper towel and just blend it all out. Again, not trying to keep to that shape, just kind of toning my whole paper with it. If, again, this method is a pretty messy, a little bit chaotic method, if that's something that you really don't want to do, you can just try to shade within that shape and just take out the edges a little bit to soften the edges where you can see the shadow has a very soft edge. Using a smudge stump or stick would probably work really well for that if you wanted to control that blending a little bit better. I will be using one of those later in the video as I want to control the shading a little bit more on the pepper, so feel free to use that earlier if you want. Again, I like using the paper towel just to kind of tone my whole page and kind of take away just some of that bright white of the paper. Then I am coming in with my second layer of charcoal, just coming in kind of redefining these shadow shapes, taking it a little bit slower, really coming in and trying to find the subtler values and shades in this pepper, redefining some of those lines, just zeroing in a little bit on what's going on. If you remember, during the drawing process, we worked from general to specific in finding the shape, and it's kind of the same principle here. I'm trying to work from the general values to the more specific values in this picture. And right there, I am kind of blending the shadow into the cast shadow, because in the reference picture, you can't really see where that line of the pepper is. It just kind of vanishes from the core shadow on the actual pepper to the cast shadow on the ground. So I kind of blended those together. Then I am just continuing on through here, again redefining that core shadow and bringing it down toward the stem. Right there, I've messed up a little bit trying to re-find where that landmark is around that bump. And then erasing out that charcoal that shouldn't have been there. The kneaded eraser works great. You can just kind of tap at your drawing instead of really digging in and, getting this blank white spot. You can just tap at it and lift out a little bit of that charcoal so you don't kind of create a glaring highlight where you don't want a highlight to be. Then I come in, just continue to refine those shapes a little bit, reestablish those lines. It's just really a constant effort of finding your image, then kind of shading it over, losing it a little bit, then finding it again, and just whittling down to the shapes that you really want and the shades that you really want. I'll come in now and just blend it all over again. I'm slowly trying to get rid of some of the pencil marks that I have established in drawing this. If you're trying to draw something photorealistically, you generally don't want to be able to see each mark of your pencil, and so you really, really, really want to just blend out and make everything look nice and smooth. But that's, of course, only for that kind of image. There's loads and loads of artwork out there that has the cross-hatching, the line work, the ink work that just looks phenomenal if that's what you're going for. So there's certainly nothing wrong with leaving the pencil marks in your drawing. But if you're going for something that looks really realistic and really polished, then you usually have to work pretty hard to get rid of those lines. And it can take a really long time of putting layer after layer and blending it down and layer after layer. So definitely feel free to really take your time on this if that's the look that you're going for. And now I'm going to come in and kind of specify where that highlight is again. I'd lost that highlight shape. So with my eraser, I can come and kind of carve that out. With the kneaded eraser, it's not going to be as strong, just because kneaded erasers are pretty soft. If you want that highlight to really pop, you can go in with a hard eraser and really get those whites to become really white again. But I'll just kind of continue cleaning up this line a little bit. Then I will switch to a time lapse as I just work to continue to clarify the image and really zoom in kind of on these different shadows and the subtle changes of shade. And I will be using a blending stump for that. Those are great for using for more detailed blending and pictures and stuff like that. And don't let the time lapse fool you. This is something that does take a really long time. That makes it seem really, really fast to just, throw this stuff down and be done in a few seconds. But this time lapse, which is, maybe a minute long, was about an hour of drawing time. And it's one of those things that I could have drawn this for hours upon hours. There's really not a finishing point on, pictures like this. You can just keep fiddling with it forever. And so at a certain point, you do just have to kind of step away from it and decide to be done. If it's just an exercise, that point can come a lot sooner and be like, I've learned what I wanted to learn from this piece. I'm going to move on. If it is, a finished piece that you want to put on your wall or something, you might spend some more time on it. But at a certain point, you got to learn when you want to be finished, because, you can get sucked in and work on something forever and get really frustrated with it. It's easy to burn out on a single piece if you work on it for too long. So throughout all of that, I was just really trying to pay attention to each little value and really slow down and take my time on it. And it's this kind of constant back and forth. I usually put down charcoal, smear it out, it got really dark, so then I come in with my eraser, I lighten up, maybe it got too light, so I put some more charcoal down, eraser, charcoal, and kind of this back and forth that can feel kind of maddening sometimes. But you're just slowly trying to hone in on the values from your reference and really try to get it accurate. And it can take a while to find exactly what those values are. And then you'll find out that your drawing was kind of off. So you go in and you try to fix it a little bit, and things kind of grow and change as you draw. But you got to learn to kind of grow and change with it. So again, if you're just doing a drawing for an exercise, once you've learned what you wanted to learn from the exercise, it's great to walk away from it. Don't attach too much to just a practice piece. If it is something that you really want to look really nice and finished, go ahead and invest that time and dedication to it. It's a really good feeling to create something that you're really proud of. But if it's not working out and you look at it and you realize that you're not proud of it and you don't want anyone else to see it ever, that is totally fine too. I have stacks and stacks of sketchbooks that I hope never see the light of day because the artwork in them is genuinely terrible, but that's just the process of learning. So definitely do not be afraid to try and to fail, because that's how you'll learn and that's how you'll get better. So with this particular piece, I've spent maybe an hour and a half on it. It's a far cry from the best thing I've ever done. It's a far cry from the worst thing I've ever done. It's all right. It's a sketch. You can still see all the pencil marks and stuff. If I really wanted to make it all nice and polished, I could dedicate, another 3 or 4 hours to it and make it look incredible. Or I could count it as the exercise that it is, learn from it, put it away, and, move on to a new project. It's better to get, a lot of projects done than to get stuck on one that you just want to get perfect. So I hope that some of this has been helpful for you. Any tips that have helped, or just seeing the process. Again, this is totally just my process. Other artists out there will have very different suggestions for what works for them. So, as always, thank you so much for watching. I hope some of it helped, and I hope you have a lot of fun drawing. Thank you for watching.